Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere loud but telling it softly. You're waking up in the far south of Japan in the city of Kagoshima, year 1877. It's dark out. A few bamboo torches flicker along the stone pathways of your barracks, and the smell of damp earth seeps through the thin paper walls. You're cold, you're tired, and your back hurts not from a battlefield wound, but from sleeping on a rolled straw mat stuffed with last season's rice husks. And yes, you're technically a samurai. But don't get ahead of yourself. You're not standing proudly with a topknot fluttering in the wind while peasants gaze up in awe. You're standing barefoot on freezing floorboards, scratching at a flea bite and wondering if there's any dried radish left for breakfast. Spoiler, there isn't. This is not the age of the romantic samurai. This is the end. And frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a day here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere across the globe, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rebellion hasn't technically started yet, but it's close. You and a few thousand others serve under Saigo Takamori, a man some call the last true samurai. He's not flashy, he barely even speaks some mornings, but when he does speak, men listen. He's the kind of leader who'd rather walk behind you than ride in front of you, and that's rare these days. You check your sword. It's a family heirloom handed down through 3 generations. You've never used it outside of training. The blade is slightly chipped, but you wouldn't dare say that out loud. Not when the guy next to you sharpens his katana like it's a therapy session. Outside, roosters are starting to cry and some younger soldiers are boiling millet porridge in a dented iron pot. The smell is bland, but you'll take bland over nothing. One guy mutters that the imperial government's food rations are better. You shoot him a glare. Complaining about the emperor is a good way to get assigned latrine duty, or worse. Kagoshima used to be a proud domain, but lately it's become a place for disillusioned swordsmen and jobless samurai who refuse to shave their top knots. The Meiji Restoration changed everything. No more stipends, no more carrying swords in public, and worst of all, no more purpose. You used to protect something. A family name, a clan, maybe even an old stone wall. Now you're mostly guarding your own pride. Historians still argue whether Saigo wanted a rebellion or if he was pushed into it by the young hotheads around him. Doesn't really matter anymore. The wheels are already turning. A messenger arrives just before breakfast is done. He's sweaty, breathless, and whispering something urgent to one of the officers. You lean closer. Something about a ship Imperial spies caught trying to sabotage the local armory. Again. You thought this was supposed to be over. You thought the Tokugawa were the ones resisting change. But here you are, gearing up to resist the new change. No one says the word treason, but it's on everyone's face. Saigo calls a meeting. You don't get to attend, only senior samurai go, but you hear the decision later. It's time to march north to Tokyo. You're going to remind the Meiji government that the spirit of the samurai isn't just a museum relic. There's a quiet energy now, even among the grumblers. Some are tying their armor on for the first time in months. Others are writing short letters. Not to mail, there's no time for that. Just words left behind on small slips of paper. In case. You sit with your friend Toru, age 16, who still thinks this will be an adventure. He shows you the kanji he's carved into his sword handle. Loyalty, it's misspelled. You say nothing. Your pack is light. A rice ball, a pouch of salted plums, and a spare pair of tabi socks. You were hoping for more. But this isn't a samurai film. This is real, and supplies are limited, especially since most of Japan doesn't support your cause. The Meiji government calls you rebels, former warriors clinging to a vanished world. And maybe they're right. But as you strap your sword and sling your bundle over your shoulder, you try not to think about that. You just listen to the quiet footsteps in the courtyard, the tightening of sandals, the gentle groans of men pretending not to be afraid. The sun is rising over Sakurajima volcano in the distance. The sky is blood orange, and a thin layer of mist still clings to the trees. You close your eyes just for a moment. This might be the last morning that still feels like peace. You march. Not into glory, not into fame, just into blisters and silence. The road from Kagoshima twists northward through uneven hills and bamboo forests that rattle in the wind like dry bones. You and several thousand others trudge in uneven lines a slow river of worn-out sandals and grumbling joints. Some men try to hum marching songs, but the rhythm never sticks. Your thoughts drown the music. It's mid-February 1877. The cold isn't unbearable, but it seeps into your sleeves and behind your collar, reminding you with each step that this isn't a parade. This is a rebellion, an unpopular one. Behind you, Kagoshima grows smaller with every mile. Ahead, you're promised a confrontation with the Meiji government, young, well-armed, and not particularly interested in hearing about Bushido ideals. You have swords, they have rifles, and they're not shy with bullets. Your unit gets assigned to push the artillery cart, which is mostly a glorified wooden wheelbarrow full of old misaligned cannons. You're not sure they'll fire, but no one says that out loud. The rebels around you are mostly former samurai or conscripts who quit their post jobs to join the cause. Some of them carry swords passed down for generations. Others hold rusted bayonets and hope no one notices. Every few miles, the group pauses for water or to swap out exhausted mules. That's when the aches really creep in hips, knees, especially your lower back. You were trained to sit and seize a posture for hours, but not to drag 50 pounds of weaponry uphill on 2 rice balls a day. Funny how the body protests rebellion faster than the mind. Mid-morning, you pass through a small village. The people there don't cheer. They don't offer food or flowers. They mostly stare. Some bow politely and disappear indoors. A few leave baskets of vegetables near the road without a word. You wonder if they support your cause or just pity you. You share a roasted yam with Toru, who's still smiling despite the grime on his face. He thinks he saw a fox watching from the trees and calls it a lucky omen. Historians still argue whether local superstition fueled rebel morale more than actual strategy. But hey, when you're hungry and doomed, a lucky fox is better than nothing. By noon, rumors ripple down the column the Meiji government has sent troops south, and not just any troops, Western-trained soldiers with breech-loading rifles and military advisors who speak French and German. The phrase "no mercy" comes up more than once. You try to calculate your odds. You've got maybe 12,000 men. Most are loyal, some are limping, and at least 2 are definitely just tagging along to dodge taxes. You also have a few mountain passes on your side, and the terrain gets rougher up ahead. Maybe that'll help. Spoiler alert, it won't help much. At the next camp stop, you're assigned watch duty. That means crouching under a camouflage tarp with a notched spear and a half-burnt lantern trying to distinguish shadows from sentries. A bird flaps overhead and you nearly skewer the guy next to you. He doesn't even flinch. He's asleep, sitting up, eyes half open. Later, a message comes from one of Saigo's officers. You aren't allowed to read it, but the reader's face says everything. The Meiji forces have cut off the train lines ahead. You'll have to find another route. Great. And you're running low on rice. Still, there's something weirdly comforting in the routine. You've stopped worrying about the smell of wet socks or the bite of cold air. Your muscles burn, but your mind is slowing down, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from the quiet. Saigo passes by in the late afternoon. He doesn't ride a horse. He walks like everyone else, dressed in plain clothes and looking like a retired schoolteacher. But everyone steps aside respectfully. Some even bow. No orders, just presence. That's enough. You overhear a conversation between 2 older rebels. One claims the real reason for the rebellion isn't the sword ban or the dissolved domains, its dignity. Another says it's because Saigo was tricked, set up by Meiji politicians who feared his influence. Historians still debate that one. All you know is you're here now, and turning back isn't on the table. Night falls as your unit reaches a field near Kumamoto. Campfires dot the horizon like fireflies, and the stars begin to crawl across the sky. You sit on a rock chewing a dried fish strip that tastes like rope and ashes. Toru's yam is long gone. He's asleep curled up beside his sword. You try not to think about tomorrow, but you do. There will be rain soon. The clouds are getting heavier. And somewhere beyond the trees, a modern army waits, better fed, better armed, and possibly wondering why you'd still charge a rifle line with a sword. A man nearby hums an old lullaby, the kind your grandfather used to sing. You never thought you'd miss that sound. Your eyelids droop. The ground is damp. You don't dream. You're too tired for that. You wake to the sound of hooves in the mud and the crackling of a rain-soaked fire. Your neck aches from sleeping upright against a tree root. Someone forgot to stoke the flames during the night, and now the morning chill settles into your bones like a long-term tenant. Toru is already up. He's rearranging his armor straps and trying to dry his socks on the dying coals. You both pretend things feel normal, like this is just another stop on a long journey, but even he isn't smiling today. Shortly after dawn, a rider arrives, not with food, not with reinforcements, with paper. The sealed message is from the Imperial Army addressed to Saigo Takamori himself. It's formal, almost poetic in tone. It says, "Return to Kagoshima and disband your forces. There is still time to restore your honor, but only if you surrender now." Saigo reads it slowly, standing in the wet grass with steam rising from his shoulders. The men nearby go quiet, waiting. He folds the letter calmly, thanks the messenger, and walks away. You don't hear what he says to his officers, but within the hour the orders come down. Dig trenches. No one says this is it. They don't need to. The sleepy quiet of the march is replaced by scraping shovels, groaning carts, and the rhythmic chop of axes as trees are felled for barricades. You're stationed near Kumamoto Castle, which is still loyal to the Meiji government and heavily fortified. You'll be digging into the earth, not storming it. Apparently someone's hoping for a siege. You spend the next few days in a damp half-circle around the city, huddled behind makeshift walls of dirt, bamboo, and overturned carts. The trench you dig with your own hands collapses twice, once from the rain, once because a mule wandered into it. Sleep becomes a negotiation. There's the usual ache in your shoulders, the sting of open blisters, and now mosquitoes. So many mosquitoes. You fan them away with your sleeve, but they keep coming like tiny, indifferent assassins. Food is even worse. You're down to a fistful of rice and half a sweet potato you found under someone's coat. Historians still argue whether rebel supply lines ever truly existed, or if the whole army just survived on local favors and chewing bark. You try to distract yourself by talking to the man beside you. He used to be a retainer in a noble household. Now he's hollow-eyed, clutching a rusty wakizashi and muttering a prayer you don't recognize. He's worried about dying without writing his death poem. You offer him a piece of charcoal and some cloth. He nods but doesn't write. One night the Imperial Army sends another message, but this time by cannon. A warning shot maybe, or maybe they just felt like flexing. The noise shakes the ground under your feet. You grip your sword tighter and whisper, "It's fine," like that'll make it true. It's not fine. The truth is, these aren't the battles of your grandfather's time. The Meiji soldiers have modern rifles, Gatling guns, and mortars. You have swords, spears, and homemade dynamite that someone keeps storing under a cooking pot. Smart. You hear a story from a nearby unit. The Emperor's men captured a rebel scout, offered him a meal, and then sent him home without punishment. As a message, "We're civilized now. We don't need to kill you to defeat you." Chilling, effective, honestly kind of rude. The next day, rain comes heavy and fast. Your trench floods, your boots squelch with every step, and Toru loses one of his sandals in the mud. He ties a strip of straw around his foot and keeps moving. You hear another rumor, this one about a unit defecting to the other side. Historians still debate whether it was an actual defection or just a desperate retreat. Either way, morale dips like a leaking rice barrel. Then in the late afternoon, another messenger arrives, this one from within your own ranks. He brings a copy of Saigo's handwritten refusal to surrender. No signatures, just 8 brushstroke characters, simple and sharp. Shichisho Hokoku. Serve the country even after 7 deaths. You don't know what it means at first, but it gets passed around like a charm. Even the doubters go quiet when they read it. You think about what would make a man say that and mean it, the kind of belief it takes, or maybe the kind of weariness. You're not sure which. That night, a single lantern burns in the command tent. Saigo is writing again, this time slower, as if the ink resists him. You won't know until much later that he's drafting his final letters. To friends, to family, to the government. Some will say he still hoped for peace. Others will say he wanted this ending all along. You just hope tomorrow stays quiet. Spoiler, it won't. You hear the guns before you see the sunrise. It's still dark when the first crack echoes through the hills. Not a single shout, no bugle, no war cry, just the flat mechanical rhythm of a Gatling gun spinning its grim melody into the dawn. You wake to the ground trembling, and the realization that the Battle of Shirayama has begun. And you're in it. Your hands fumble for your sword. It's cold and slippery, the hilt damp from the night air. Toru is already up, eyes wide and mouth dry, looking at you like a boy who just realized his school play is somehow a real war. You're stationed on a wooded slope, part of the last rebel holdout. The Imperial Army has circled you, more than 30,000 men with modern rifles and artillery surrounding your less than 400 samurai in a final brutal siege. You remember Saigo's orders: hold the hill, don't surrender, don't run. Simple, terrifying. You crouch behind a chest-high rock wall someone built 2 days ago. The mud is thick, sucking at your feet every time you shift position. You hear the whistle of incoming shells, and you instinctively duck, not because it helps, but because it feels like something. The first wave of gunfire comes like a storm. Trees splinter, dirt leaps skyward. A man 3 feet to your right screams and drops his blade, shot through the shoulder. Another stumbles backward and vanishes behind the ridge. And you freeze. Your sword stays sheathed. You can't hear anything over the pounding in your ears. Eventually, your body remembers how to move. You crawl forward through the wet underbrush, trying to find a better position. You glance at Toru. He's crouched low, eyes scanning the smoke ahead. He's shaking, but still holding his blade with both hands. You envy his resolve, or maybe his denial. A cannon blast lands too close. Your ears ring. Everything goes white for a moment. Then it comes back in pieces, shouts, smoke, and a strange hissing smell like burnt tea leaves. You finally draw your sword. The irony doesn't escape you. A hand-forged katana, balanced and curved to perfection, now facing a world with bolt-action rifles and machine gunners who don't even look up from their posts. Historians still argue whether Saigo knew how hopeless this was, whether he believed in a glorious last stand or just preferred a meaningful end to a meaningless survival. Either way, you're here now, and there's no pause button. The Imperial forces begin their approach, not a full charge, but calculated movements, units fanning out, firing in bursts, forcing your side to retreat inward inch by inch. Every time you move, the ground fights you. Your socks are soaked, your legs numb, and your stomach growls in a hollow, almost mocking way. You swing your sword once more out of instinct, then aim. It carves the air, not a soldier. Beside you, someone shouts, "For Saigo." It's both a rallying cry and a prayer. You don't yell, you just breathe, in, out, grip tight, stay low, move when they reload. At one point, a group of rebels manages to push down the slope and force the enemy line back a few feet. There's cheering, but it's brief. A second Gatling opens fire from the ridge, and the cheering stops. You fall to your knees behind a pile of wet sandbags. You've never been this tired, not in training, not on the march. This is fatigue that goes deeper than muscle. It's the kind that tells you the story is ending even if no one says it out loud. Then someone calls out, "He's hit." Saigo-sama's been hit. You can't see it from your position, but the words move through the trenches like lightning. Some say he was shot in the hip. Others whisper he took a bullet to the stomach. Either way, he's been carried inside a cave at the base of the hill, away from the fighting. You feel something collapse in your chest. Not fear exactly, not even grief, just the slow exhale of knowing this is the last chapter. Toru turns to you and says, "Should we run?" You shake your head. There's nowhere to run to, and you're right. The Imperial net has closed. There will be no escape, no backup, no twist ending. Just you, your sword, and whatever happens next. As noon approaches, the gunfire starts to thin. You think for one hopeful moment that maybe they're pulling back, maybe they're done. They're not. They're just switching to bayonets. Close quarters now. Screams replace bullets. You raise your sword and finally swing with real intent. You don't know if you hit someone. You don't know if it matters. There's a blur of bodies, the clash of metal, the smell of blood and earth and old wood. Your hands are cramping. Your vision is swimming. You see Toru fall. It happens in slow motion like a curtain being drawn. He doesn't scream. You want to reach him, but your legs no longer respond the way they used to. A second later, everything is fire and fog again. And then, nothing. You open your eyes to silence. Not the peaceful kind, not bird song or temple bells. This silence is heavy, the sort that settles over battlefields when all the shouting is done. There's no gunfire now, no shouts of command, just the soft drip of water from a broken canteen and the distant shuffle of boots on wet gravel. You're lying on your side in the mud. Your sword is gone. Your left hand is numb, maybe broken. You try to sit up, but your ribs protest with a deep ache. Something grazed you, a bullet. Shrapnel, you're not sure. But you're alive, somehow. Around you, the world is slowed down. Men lie still in torn uniforms. Some were your comrades. Some were just hungry conscripts. You recognize none of their faces, but all of them feel familiar now. There's no order anymore, just bodies and the faint whine of wind. To your right, the hill of Shiroyama rises in uneven tiers, once bristling with rebels, now bare and scorched. The makeshift barricades are gone blown apart by cannon fire. The tree trunks have been shredded to stumps. It looks less like a battlefield and more like the aftermath of a storm the old gods might have sent if they still watched this place. You stumble to your feet, dizzy. There's a dull ringing in your ears and a strange metallic taste in your mouth. You stagger uphill, stepping carefully over broken armor-charred bundles, a snapped flagpole. One sandal is missing. Your toes curl instinctively in the cold dirt. You find what's left of your unit near a burned-out supply cart. No one speaks. The only sound is a man quietly crying behind a collapsed tree trunk. You don't look at him. You just nod once and move past. You're not sure what you're looking for. Maybe Toru, maybe Saigo, maybe a reason. And then you see it, the cave, half hidden by ivy and brush down near the base of the hill, a small entrance no wider than a horse cart shaded by what used to be a cherry tree. You approach slowly, unsure if it's even allowed, but no one stops you. In fact, no one seems to care anymore. Inside, it's cool and damp. A faint light filters in from a broken lantern near the wall. There are 3 men. 2 of them stand silently, heads bowed. The third lies still on a woven mat covered from chest to shin in a faded blue cloth. His face is calm, eyes closed, hands resting neatly across his stomach. It's Saigo Takamori. They say he was wounded early in the fight, possibly fatally. Some believe he took his own life. Others claim a loyal follower helped him perform seppuku, the ritual suicide of the samurai. And then there are those who insist he died from blood loss unconscious and unaware, his final thoughts drifting elsewhere. Historians still argue over the exact moment of his death. What is known, this was his last stand. And it happened here in this small dark space at the edge of a hill now soaked with the past. You kneel beside the body, not out of duty, but because your knees finally give in. Your breath comes shallow. You stare at the folds of his robe, at the ink-stained callus on his writing hand. Even in death he looks burdened, not proud, not glorious, just tired. The sun rises behind the clouds, casting a pale glow on the cave entrance. Outside, the Imperial soldiers are beginning cleanup, collecting weapons, removing bodies, writing reports. No one's cheering. There are no victors here, just survivors, some with uniforms, some with swords, all wondering quietly what they've won. By late afternoon, the Meiji flag flies over Shiroyama, and the age of the samurai is over. You stay for one more hour unmoving, not praying, not thinking, just listening to the last echoes of a vanished world. Eventually, a soldier taps your shoulder and tells you to move along. You nod, you rise, and you walk downhill barefoot, bruised, unarmed. Not every rebel died on that hill, but every samurai did. And now here you are, floating gently away from that hillside where the mud is drying and the air has finally quieted. The fog has lifted from the trees. The last embers have faded into ash. There's no more shouting, no more orders, no more marching. Only the slow hush of wind brushing through pine branches and the rhythmic drip of water down mossy stone. Saigo Takamori sleeps now, buried not just in soil, but in memory, the kind that blurs over time until it feels more like a dream than a man. His rebellion failed, but his story stayed. A final spark of an age that refused to surrender quietly. As you drift further from Shiroyama, you begin to feel your body lighten. The aches soften, the cold fades. You're no longer limping or clutching a sword. You're simply resting now, weightless breath, slow and even. And maybe, just maybe, you begin to understand why they stood their ground. Not because they thought they'd win, but because they couldn't imagine a world where they simply stepped aside. So now, as the sounds of history fade behind you, you're free to let go of the weight of it all. The gunfire, the mud, the long march and short tempers. All that's left is silence and sleep. Hey guys, tonight we drift quietly into the dust-swirled courtyards of ancient Persia, back to a time when empires stretched like shadows across the sand, when gold-roofed halls shimmered under the desert sun, and when your biggest worry might just be whether you remembered your ink brush. The Palace of Persepolis looms nearby, its columns rising like stone stalks into the sky. Lions carved into staircases stare you down. You try not to blink first. You are a low-ranking scribe in service to someone who reports to someone who once brushed shoulders with someone important. In short, you're not nobody, but you're not getting your name etched in any tablets either. You've got just enough status to be invited to the meetings and just enough anxiety to never speak at them. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day begins at dawn, which for some reason always involves a rooster 2 buildings over, screaming like it owes you money. You rise from your woven mat stretch until something pops and slaps the dust from your tunic. Today, you tell yourself, will be thrilling. Perhaps you'll witness a tax form being corrected, or maybe you'll be trusted to carry the ink box. The walk to the palace complex takes 20 minutes, 30 if you stop to inspect the absurdly precise symmetry of the paving stones. You always do. It's a coping mechanism. The streets of Persepolis are already murmuring, merchants arranging jars, soldiers yawning into their helmets, a camel sneezing in existential protest. By the time you reach the scribal wing, the sun has turned the stone walls a sleepy gold. You nod to the other scribes. They nod back with the enthusiasm of dry clay. Your station is a small desk made of cedar, probably once part of a boat or a very unlucky temple door. Upon it, a stylus, a wax tablet, and a tiny dish of fig paste. You try not to dip your stylus into the fig paste again. Last time the inscription read, "By order of the king all goats must taste delicious." You settle into the slowest part of the day, transcribing grain inventories from the northern provinces, line by line, sack by sack. The numbers are hypnotic and not in a good way. You begin to wonder whether barley has emotions. Then you begin to wonder if you do. Historians still argue whether Persian scribes had much creative freedom or if their entire lives were spent recording shipments of lentils. Some scrolls feature elaborate doodles in the margins, swirls birds. Even one very bored-looking lion, which could suggest either a playful spirit or a total breakdown in discipline. Today's scroll contains a footnote written in a different hand. 4 camels missing, possibly drunk. You blink. You reread. You copy it word for word. It's not your job to question camel motives. Mid-morning brings a burst of action. A royal courier bursts in with a tablet sealed in green wax green, the color reserved for garden matters and minor scandals. You're tasked with reading it aloud. You clear your throat and declare, "To the keeper of trees, please relocate the fig saplings from the western terrace. They are too judgmental." No one laughs. You nod solemnly. Trees are known to carry grudges. By now the sun is climbing. The wax on your tablet softens slightly, making every stroke a gamble. You pause to stretch, and someone asks if you'd like to assist in documenting a census of the royal pigeon loft. You agree, far too eagerly. The pigeon chamber is unsurprisingly loud. Feathers drift through the air like weird snow. You're handed a stylus and told to count. The pigeons do not cooperate. One pecks your sandal, another refuses to identify its district. You try your best. Gray pigeon possibly named Cyrus. Mood aggressive. Back at your desk, you're rewarded with half a date and a lukewarm cup of barley tea. The tea tastes like wet straw and disappointment, but you sip it like a king. Why? Because for one glorious hour, you were pigeon adjacent. You begin composing a poem in your head. Nothing too bold, just something about how life is a scroll that occasionally smudges. You'll never write it down, but it makes the barley math feel a little less eternal. As midday approaches, your supervisor arrives and glances over your shoulder. He grunts approvingly, then corrects your spelling of emmer wheat. You nod as if this is the most important thing anyone has ever said to you. You file the morning's tablets into the archive wall, one by one, each slot labeled with a neat symbol: Fish Mountain Star, Bundle of Reeds. Yours goes under Bundle of Reeds. You tell yourself that's poetic. And then finally, mercifully, the bell rings. Not a literal bell, of course, just a guard shouting lunch and waving a stick. You rise slowly. You've earned your lentils. You step out into the courtyard where the sun now pours like hot syrup over everything. The stones are just warm enough to make your sandals sweat a little. You contemplate removing them, but then remember the last time you did and how a pebble the size of a chickpea somehow brought you to tears. The lunch hour in Persepolis is neither rushed nor particularly exciting. It's simply observed like a tax or a solar eclipse. You follow the slow trickle of other workers down a side alley that leads to the food stalls just outside the palace perimeter. They're technically not allowed to sell food this close to a royal structure, but they make up for it by not telling anyone what's actually in their soup. You queue behind a bearded man in a wool tunic who smells like onions and destiny. Ahead of him, a median goat merchant loudly negotiates the price of a date tart, while a camel tied nearby eats someone's hat. You don't intervene. The hat deserved it. When your turn comes, you ask for the usual, which is a flatbread that's sort of like a pancake and sort of like regret stuffed with lentils, scallions, and exactly 2 pomegranate seeds. It costs 3 pebbles and a sigh. You pay. You find a shady spot beneath a cypress tree where the stone wall makes a decent backrest, and the fig tree behind you seems relatively non-judgmental. You begin eating, slowly, reverently. The bread flakes just enough to make a mess, but not enough to apologize for it. Beside you, the goat merchant sits with his pack slung over one shoulder. He offers you a dried apricot in exchange for half your bread. You accept because it's hot. The air smells like grilled onions, and honestly, you'd trade your sandals for an apricot right now. As you chew, the merchant begins talking. You didn't ask him to. That's not how this works. Back home, he says, gesturing vaguely north, we don't trust the pomegranates. Too red, too round. Makes you wonder what they're hiding. You nod thoughtfully, as if this is a common agricultural concern. He continues tales of goats who can predict sandstorms, of grandmothers who can read omens in chickpea stew, and of a cousin who once wrestled a peacock for a date tart and lost. You try not to imagine the logistics. You ask him about the latest palace gossip and he leans in conspiratorially. Word is, he whispers the king's new chariot only turns left. You don't even blink. That sounds exactly right. Historians still argue whether informal lunchtime chatter in ancient Persia played any real political role, or if everyone was just pretending to be informed so their food tasted better. Several scholars believe that date tart diplomacy may have swayed minor court appointments. Others maintain it was just a way to pass the time until the sun moved 2 fingers westward. You finish your apricot and attempt to rise, but the goat merchant has more to say. Did you hear about the satrap who banned shadows? You haven't. You regret asking. He explains that during a particularly hot summer, a regional governor decided that all shadows were signs of laziness and ordered citizens to stand only in direct sunlight. The people revolted by inventing umbrellas. The satrap was reassigned to carrot logistics. You excuse yourself politely and begin wandering the bazaar, which is always just a few stalls away from complete chaos. You pass a spice seller arguing with a weaver about cinnamon accuracy. A potter selling cracked cups insists they're emotionally distressed. A man juggling chickens asks if you've seen his wife. You haven't. You also wonder if the chickens count. You pause at a stand selling carved stamps. Tiny clay seals with animals, stars, or vague geometric designs. You consider buying one shaped like a suspicious-looking squirrel. You do not, but the squirrel haunts you. A gong sounds somewhere in the distance. Not a large gong, just loud enough to say, lunch is over, return to your bureaucracy. You return. Back in the palace, your tunic slightly dustier and your sandals slightly less enthusiastic, you pass the royal gardens. The scent of myrtle and rosewater makes the afternoon seem momentarily elegant. For about 12 seconds, you feel like someone whose name might be remembered. Then a bee flies into your sleeve. You do not feel majestic anymore. Inside the Hall of Records, the supervisor is waiting. He asks if you've seen the barley reports from Susa. You haven't. He sighs with the weight of 7 scrolls and assigns you to the Bureau of Weights for the afternoon. This is not a punishment. This is simply life. But before you go, you take one last look at the pomegranate tree by the outer wall. Still too red. Still too round. Still hiding something. You arrive at the Bureau of Weights exactly 6 minutes after the hour. Not late, just marginally unhurried. The clerk at the front desk raises a brow, but says nothing. His tunic is immaculately pressed and smells faintly of dried mint and absolute authority. You step inside the chamber. It is not a thrilling room. It is in fact the exact opposite of thrilling. This is a space where dreams go to be measured in half-cubit increments and then filed alphabetically. The walls are lined with wooden shelves stacked with labeled jars, bowls, bricks, and one mysterious basket that hasn't been opened since the reign of Darius. No one dares ask why. Your task to verify and reweigh exactly 117 barley measures sent from a storage depot 3 provinces east. You are handed a ledger the size of a pillow and a set of balancing scales so finely calibrated that even your breath makes the pointer twitch. The clerk warns you not to sign near it. You nod solemnly. And so begins the quiet, grainy ballet. You scoop, you weigh, you note. You scoop again. Occasionally, a barley kernel will rebelliously fall to the floor, and you must decide whether to ignore it or chase it with ceremonial urgency. You always choose urgency. It makes you feel alive. Historians still argue whether Persian record-keeping was genuinely this meticulous or simply exaggerated by later bureaucrats trying to justify their careers. Some believe the Persians invented bureaucracy as a form of spiritual endurance training. Others claim it was just an elaborate excuse to collect more clay tablets. Regardless, you are now 3 measures deep and already contemplating the meaning of volume, not philosophically, just literally. You wonder if one of these barley sacks is gaslighting the rest. You casually test it again. It's fine, probably. The man next to you is humming an ancient lullaby about millet taxes. You hum along out of solidarity. Somewhere around the 43rd measure, you take a brief break to stretch your fingers. This involves awkwardly waving your hands in slow circles while making tiny grunting noises. No one comments. They are doing it too. Your supervisor pops in briefly to check your work and leaves behind a slice of dried apple as a token of encouragement. It tastes like admiration and cardboard. You savor every chew. On the 72nd measure, things get exciting. One of the scales tips ever so slightly in the wrong direction, not by much, just enough to suggest treachery. You remeasure, same result. You alert the clerk. He arrives, adjusts his belt, peers at the barley like it owes him an apology and declares, "This measure is off by 2 kernels." You blink. He nods. Together you remove exactly 2 kernels. Balance is restored. The empire endures. The afternoon sun begins its slow tilt through the window slats, casting long diagonal shadows across your table. It makes the barley glisten in a way that almost feels poetic. Almost. You pause for a sip of your barley water. Yes, even your beverages are themed. As the pace settles into a rhythm, your mind drifts. You remember the goat merchant and his conspiracy theories. You wonder if there truly is a satrap who fears shadows. You recall the suspicious squirrel stamp and regret not purchasing it. You vow quietly to return tomorrow. By the 93rd measure, the clerk begins telling a story. It's about a nobleman who once tried to bribe a grain inspector with a basket of sweet dates and a particularly flattering poem. The inspector took the poem, rejected the dates, and added 3 extra taxes to the nobleman's next shipment. Moral of the story: never underestimate a man who owns 6 different weighing stones. You finish the last measure just as the light shifts golden orange. The clerk places a wax seal at the bottom of your ledger, marking it with the official insignia of the bureau, a barley sheaf flanked by 2 very bored lions. You have now completed your task. To celebrate, the clerk invites you to join the weight balance ritual. This is not as spiritual as it sounds. It involves placing the smallest stone, called the whisper weight, on the scale and watching as everyone holds their breath to see if it moves. It never does, but the silence is very soothing. You exit the bureau with barley dust on your sleeves and the quiet pride of a person who has helped the empire not collapse today. The guards nod as you pass. You nod back just a touch more dramatically than necessary. In the corridor, you overhear 2 junior scribes arguing about whether the new ink recipe is too runny or just enthusiastic. You resist the urge to join the debate. You are above that now. You have weighed things. You step into the main hall just as a breeze floats in through an open window. It carries the scent of jasmine dust and maybe, just maybe, a hint of roasted chickpeas. You pause at the window, look out at the hills beyond the palace walls. They're bathed in gold. Somewhere out there, a caravan moves slowly across the road, its camels trailing dust and ambition. And you return to your desk a little straighter than before and sit once more. The empire may be vast, but today you measured its barley. The sun is beginning its gentle descent behind the Zagros mountains, casting everything in the palace in that almost magical hue of dusty amber and elongated shadows. You rise from your desk like a carefully unrolled scroll and make your way toward the fire temple. It's not required. No one orders you to attend the evening rituals unless you're in the priesthood or have very nosy neighbors, but the soft hush of it, the slow-burning embers and the faint smell of sandalwood have a way of easing the mind after a day of counting grains. The temple isn't far, just a few turns through colonnaded walkways and past the hallway where 2 royal cats famously had a stare-down that lasted 12 days. No one interrupts that hallway anymore. As you approach, you hear the soft murmurs of prayer. A small group of white-robed attendants are already gathered around the central flame, which burns in an elevated bronze basin carved with scenes of mythical winged bulls and possibly a duck. It's hard to say. The duck seems angry. You remove your sandals, step quietly into the chamber, and join the others at a respectful distance. The fire crackles not loudly, but in that polite way sacred flames tend to do. The air is thick with incense. You can almost taste the myrrh. The magi leading the service chant something melodic in Old Persian. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm lulls you. The flickering light plays on everyone's faces, turning even the grumpiest of court officials into dreamy silhouettes. You bow your head, not necessarily out of deep spiritual conviction, but because it feels right, and also because if you tilt your head just so the warmth of the fire hits that spot on the back of your neck that's been tense since lunch. Historians still argue whether the Zoroastrian fire rituals were solemn spiritual events or carefully choreographed performances of stability. Some believe the flames were symbolic of inner purity. Others suggest they were just a very persuasive way to keep people from knocking over sacred objects. One theory, whispered only by the most speculative of scholars, claims that at least one temple was run by a priest who lit incense solely to cover up the smell of his goat. Your attention drifts. To your left, a woman quietly places a clay tablet on the altar, likely a prayer or request for favor. To your right, an old man seems to be whispering to the fire itself. You wonder if the fire answers back. You decide not to ask. You're given a moment to place your own offering, just a pinch of powdered frankincense in a tiny bowl. It smolders softly like your patience during afternoon barley audits. You close your eyes, and then you hear it. A soft snore. You glance sideways. One of the attendants has absolutely dozed off mid-prayer, chin on chest robe, gently rising and falling. No one wakes him. It's not disrespectful. It's just the fire doing its job. After the final chant, the Magi rings a small bell made of copper and fish-shaped metalwork. Everyone bows and begins to disperse sandals, whispering against stone. You step out into the early night air, cool now with a breeze that smells faintly of citrus and ceremonial ash. You make your way to the royal kitchens, not for a meal, but for what might be the most curious part of your day, the smelling of the stews. Yes, it's a real thing. Each evening, the head cook lines up 3 clay pots along the outer wall and invites passers-by to guess the ingredients. It's a game, a test, a chance for the elite to pretend they know things about cumin. Tonight's stews are especially pungent. You lean over the first pot and inhale notes of lamb apricot vinegar and maybe something nutty. You guess goat with indecision. The cook chuckles and tells you it's actually pomegranate lamb with overcooked chickpeas. You weren't far off. You don't eat the stew as reserved for the royal table, but the smells alone are oddly comforting, especially the third one, which smells exactly like the inside of your grandmother's cloak. You don't ask questions. You continue walking now past the garden terraces where water channels gurgle politely and citrus trees nod sleepily. A gardener is trimming a bush into the shape of a lion playing a lyre. You think about asking why, but the man looks focused and also like someone who talks exclusively in riddles. The stars are out now. First a few. Then a quiet shimmer across the whole sky. You find a small bench near the edge of the courtyard and sit. From here, you can see almost everything the gardens. The fire temple's last glow. Even the Bureau of Weights now locked and still. The city breathes in slow pulses. You're joined by a cat. Possibly royal. Possibly not. It doesn't matter. It sits beside you and stares into the distance as if pondering the mysteries of taxation. You imitate its posture. The two of you look very wise. Your thoughts drift toward home, wherever that is now, toward the goat merchant and his pomegranate suspicions, toward the idea of doing this all again tomorrow. And it doesn't feel terrible, which in ancient Persia might be the closest thing to enlightenment. By now, the palace grounds have slipped into that soft, sleepy rhythm only great empires can afford. Torchlight flickers lazily in sconces. Somewhere a lute is plucking out a melody so slow it feels like it might fall asleep mid-note. You rise from your bench and take one last stroll out past the fountains toward the royal orchard. This, you've heard, is where whispers come to nap. The orchard is vast, bordered by neat stone walkways, and guarded by citrus trees that seem just a little too smug about their symmetry. Rows of pomegranate, fig, almond, and apricot trees stand in a sort of sleepy formation like soldiers who've been told they'll be inspected, but probably not tonight. You pass a gardener tending to a gooseberry bush. He nods. You nod. Neither of you speaks because at this hour words feel like unnecessary guests at a very small dinner party. You find your favorite tree, a short, squat fig that leans slightly to the left like it's always on the verge of telling you something scandalous. You sit beneath it. Here's where the whispers start. Not loud, just fragments, bits of dream-wrapped conversation from the other orchard visitors. A pair of court musicians quietly debating whether lyres or harps are more romantic. A young palace assistant swearing they saw the king trip on his own robe. Someone else half asleep muttering about a peach with a grudge. The night air is gentle now, almost damp, the kind of cool that makes you instinctively pull your tunic tighter and wonder why cloaks are never as dramatic in real life as they are in murals. Above, the moon peeks through a lattice of almond branches. You're not sure what phase it's in, but it's doing its job, casting silver across the stone paths and making everything look just slightly more important than it probably is. Nearby, a few of the royal gardeners gather near a stone bench and begin their usual evening ritual, recounting what they swear were secret conversations overheard among the royal plants. You don't interrupt, you just listen. "Did you hear what the fig tree said today?" one of them whispers. "Something about the treasury clerk's sandals, said they were unnecessarily loud." There are chuckles. Someone adds, "The apricot tree claims it saw a noblewoman sneak a goose into the bathhouse." Historians still argue whether these gardener rituals were mere jokes, a form of low-stakes political commentary, or subtle reminders that even the trees were paying attention. Some suggest the orchard served as an informal meeting ground for gossip too delicate for the court. Others believe it was simply the most peaceful place to pretend to work. Tonight, the conversation drifts toward dreams. One gardener claims the olive trees predict weather. Another insists the lemons judge people silently. You nod to yourself. The lemons definitely do. A fig drops from the tree above you with a quiet plop. You pick it up, feel its soft skin, and consider whether it's a gift or an accusation. You decide it's both and take a bite. Sweet, earthy, slightly overripe, just like most bureaucracies. You lie back, staring up into the layered branches above. Someone begins humming a lullaby about a hero who fell asleep during battle and accidentally won by rolling downhill into the enemy. You're fairly certain it's not historically accurate, but it's catchy. A soft wind brushes through the orchard, shaking loose a few blossoms that drift down like confetti from a very tired celebration. You wonder briefly how many empires have risen and fallen while someone somewhere stared at a tree and decided not to go back inside just yet. You begin to doze. The last thing you hear is one of the gardeners asking if anyone's seen the emperor's missing cat. The answer, of course, is no. But you're not sure the cat was ever missing, just elsewhere. The orchard fades behind you now, the whispers dimming like candles at the end of a banquet. The fig tree leans a little further, as if to tuck you in. The soft breath of the night breeze follows you as you float backward through the corridors of the palace, past the pigeon chamber, past the echo of barley measures, past the silent scales and the murmuring fire. You find yourself back at your simple bedroll, tucked into a quiet corner near the scribe's quarters. Your sandals rest neatly beside it. Someone, maybe you, maybe not, has folded your tunic with a kind of sleepy precision. Everything is slower now, softer. Even the air seems padded like a woolen blanket, too old to be decorative, but too beloved to be replaced. You lie down, eyes half closed, thoughts fluttering like moths against the oil lamp's glow. A cat curls nearby, probably royal, probably not. And as your breathing deepens, you remember one final thing today you mattered. Maybe just to a handful of barley sacks, maybe just to one goat merchant who thought you listened well, or maybe just to the fig tree. But in a place so vast, so ancient, where stories drift like smoke and nothing is written without intention, being a quiet part of it all is enough. So let it all slip away now. The scrolls, the incense, the dusty jokes. Let the empire manage itself for a while. You've done more than enough. Sleep well. Hey guys, tonight we drift quietly into the marbled hush of ancient Rome, where sunlight spills lazily across lion-footed furniture, and the scent of warmed honey clings to the air like overly ambitious incense. Outside, sandals shuffle on cobblestones and fountains mumble in Latin. But inside the imperial palace, silence. Because Emperor Nero is not awake yet. It's Tuesday, and he never rises before the sun has been properly applauded. You probably wouldn't survive this. Not because it's violent, though. Yes, sometimes it is. But because the sheer boredom of power, when combined with an unlimited supply of pomegranates and bad advice, is absolutely smothering. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up as Nero, or rather you're being woken, by a eunuch named Sporus who glides in carrying a bowl of warm milk and a face that says he's already had enough of today. You groan softly, roll over onto 5 layers of imported silk and pretend not to hear the distant sounds of petitioners arriving at the forum. That's a problem for later Nero. The chamber is dim despite the mosaic skylight shaped like a sea nymph. The ceiling creaks. Somewhere a parrot squawks the phrase, "Nero is divine" in Greek. No one remembers teaching it that, but no one dares correct it either. Eventually you sit up, stretch, yawn, gently curse the mattress for being too soft. It's made of peacock feathers after all, and your back is accustomed to firmer luxuries. You splash your face with rosewater from Alexandria, pat your cheeks with cloth soaked in Egyptian vinegar, allegedly anti-aging, and sip milk infused with crushed dates, and something called cloud honey, which may or may not just be regular honey with a fancier label. Your first activity of the day is complaining. The sandals you wore yesterday pinched, the slave who fanned you during the evening meal had too much wrist, and your dreams were absurd. You dreamed that your statue in the forum grew legs and walked into the Senate House to demand voting rights. Everyone clapped, even the statue. Historians still argue whether this particular dream was symbolic or simply a result of fermented fig paste. As you shuffle into your morning room, because of course there's a morning room, you pass 3 busts of yourself in different moods. Stoic Nero, jovial Nero, and hungry Nero. You nod politely to each out of habit. Breakfast, that's for plebeians. You prefer a light start, a few olives hand-picked by trembling servants, a slice of melon chilled in snow hauled from the Apennines, and exactly 1 spoonful of spiced dormouse paste. The spoon is gold. The dormouse did not have a choice. You're attended by a team of advisors, astrologers, and one man whose only job is to whisper flattering updates from the provinces. Today, he informs you that someone in Gaul built a new statue of you entirely from local cheese. You nod thoughtfully. Make sure it's aged properly, you murmur before drifting off again while someone massages your ankles with saffron oil. Around this time, someone suggests checking in on matters of state. Maybe sign a few decrees, glance at a taxation proposal. You wave them away. After tunic hour, you say. Not before. The minutes drift. You sip diluted wine from a cup shaped like a hippocampus. You glance at a scroll, pretend to read it, then sigh loudly and announce, "I'm overcome with the weight of empire." This is the cue for someone to bring you a cushion, possibly 2. Outside, Rome hums with the chaos of daily life, vendors shouting carts, rattling, someone loudly accusing someone else of goat theft. But in here, the day flows at a different rhythm, a kind of gentle opulence. An absurd version of slow living, the kind where you don't lift anything heavier than a date pit. You think about writing a new poem, something about thunder betrayal or how your uncle's nose resembled a turnip. But instead you recline on your couch and stare at the ceiling where tiny golden stars have been painted to glow when hit by morning light. They don't. Someone will be flogged for that, or at least strongly fanned at. By mid-morning, you are still not dressed, still not ruling, still not entirely convinced you should. But that's the beauty of being emperor on a boring Tuesday. No one can tell you that not eating breakfast for 2 hours is weird. No one will question your decision to host a one-man poetry recital to your own statue. And no one, not even your mother's ghost who still judges you in your dreams, can stop you from making today exactly as slow and peculiar as you want. Because why rush? There are still grapes to peel, poems to half write, and one truly unfortunate-looking parrot who just learned to say, "Av me." You stare at it for a moment. You wonder if it's mocking you. It probably is. Now that you've finally decided to rise hours after Rome's senators have sweated through debates, and at least one baker has been robbed by a raccoon, you shuffle toward the dressing alcove. This is not your typical wardrobe. This is an imperial wardrobe staffed by 3 grown men whose sole job is to present you with fabric options while trying not to sigh too loudly. You settle on a low marble bench, recline just so, and raise one eyebrow. This is the signal. The tunic ritual begins. Today is Tuesday. Not a festival, not a triumph, not even one of those curious Saturnine half-days where you pretend to be humble. Just a plain, unadorned, unambitious Tuesday, which makes your clothing choices both simpler and somehow more agonizing. Silk. One attendant offers reverently, holding up a glimmering lavender tunic embroidered with bees. You frown. Bees are a Thursday motif. He panics, bows, retreats. The second offers a more somber garment, deep red, lined in golden thread, rumored to have once been kissed by a Vestal virgin, or maybe just spilled wine. Either way, it has drama. You're intrigued. Historians still argue whether Nero dressed extravagantly every day or just when people were watching. Some suggest he wore simple garments in private. Others believe he kept spare togas for dramatic exits from his own bathtub. The truth is probably somewhere between cult leader and swan enthusiast. Back in the alcove, you're eyeing a teal number that simply refuses to cooperate. It bunches, it gapes, it droops. A slave tries to pin it in place, but it slips like a rebellious eel. You sigh. This is why I miss Greek fashion, you mutter. Then come the sandals, rows of them, straps, laces, metal accents, small jewels that probably came from unfortunate traders. You pause at a pair with miniature lion faces on the toes, too aggressive for a Tuesday possibly. But they do say I'm approachable, but I've conquered things. You pick them, you regret nothing. Next, the accessories. Rings, brooches, and a ceremonial dagger you won't use but like to carry because it makes your waist look smaller. You select a ring with a carved onyx cameo of yourself, kept from a senator who now lives suspiciously far from Rome. You don't ask why. Perfume comes last, always last. Today's blend includes crushed violets, ambergris, myrrh, and something described only as spring essence. You have no idea what that is, but it smells expensive and vaguely divine. An attendant wafts it toward you using a feathered fan made from a flamingo who presumably had other plans. As you're finally robed, belted, and perfumed, a runner arrives with news. Not urgent news, of course, that would come with drums, but the usual. Someone defaced a statue, someone else claimed to see a goat speak Latin, and the grain shipment from Egypt is delayed because of, quote, nautical sulking. You nod solemnly. While advisors huddle to strategize, you stare at your sleeve. A wrinkle. Tiny, barely visible, but it's there. You pluck at it. It resists. A tailor is summoned. 3 of them descend like hawks, smoothing, fussing, murmuring in whispers, only audible to linen. You watch them and think, this is power. Dressing for you is a ritual of identity. You're not just putting on clothes, you're wrapping yourself in symbols. Purple dyes forbidden to commoners, golden clasps shaped like Jupiter's lightning bolts, tunics that say I could be ruling. But instead, I'm contemplating whether pearls are gauche. Still, it's not all vanity. Rome expects this. The emperor must shine, shimmer, and sparkle just enough to distract from the rising bread prices. You are quite literally the distraction in chief. After the fitting, you parade briefly through your inner garden, where peacocks pretend not to fear you, and a lemon tree has mysteriously died for the 3rd time this month. You pause before a mirror polished from obsidian, not to admire yourself well, not only, but to check the back of your head for signs of divine glow. There are none. You pretend not to be disappointed. Finally, your tutor-turned-flatterer appears. He bows too deeply and asks the question he asks every Tuesday. Would the divine wish to address the Senate today? You look at him, you look at your sandals, you look at the sky. No, you say, the divine wishes to be admired from afar today. He nods. He was hoping you'd say that. And so, draped in silks and smelling like a floral thunderstorm, you head not to the Forum, not to the Temple of Jupiter, not even to the circus, just to your private reading room where someone has arranged scrolls by color and your favorite cushion waits indented just right. There's no agenda, no decree, just you, your excessively fragrant self, and the deeply imperial pleasure of spending 90 minutes deciding whether yellow makes you look too provincial. It's not glamorous, it's not efficient, but it is Tuesday. Lunch approaches not with urgency, but with ceremony. You don't so much eat at midday as commune with your palate. Food for you is performance, even on a boring Tuesday. You arrive at the dining room not by walking, but by drifting, flanked by two men whose only job is to make sure your robe doesn't touch the floor. One of them may be named Felix, the other might actually be Felix, but insists on being called not Felix to avoid confusion. This is what happens when you promote people based on the beauty of their earlobes. The dining chamber is calm, lit with filtered sun through marble screens carved to resemble clouds. A small waterfall gurgles somewhere in the background. A heron sits outside the window judging you. You choose to ignore it. The couches are arranged in a gentle crescent around a low table. You recline in the center, head propped up on a citrus-scented pillow. A slave enters with a tray of peeled grapes and a look that says, "Yes, I know this is absurd, but please don't excommunicate me." Your chef, a man named Calvis, who speaks in rhymes on Thursdays, has prepared something light and musical. You're not entirely sure what that means until he unveils a dish involving baked fish, rose petals, fermented anchovy paste, and a single fig cut to resemble a swan. You nod. Acceptable. The fig is delicious. Between bites, you decide spontaneously, gloriously, tragically to recite one of your latest compositions, a poem titled Ode to a Dusty Olive Jar Found Near the Latrine. You raise your hand, musicians pause, slaves kneel, a child you don't recognize drops a tambourine. The room holds its breath. You begin. The poem is long, very long. It starts with the olive jar's silent dignity, then detours through the melancholy of broken amphorae, and ends with a brief meditation on whether spoons have souls. You weep softly. So does your uncle's second cousin, though it's hard to say if it's from emotion or pollen. Historians still debate whether Nero's poetry had literary merit or if people simply clapped to avoid exile. Certainly your audience claps now. They clap like their lives depend on it, because in a way they do. You reward them with a smile and a second fig. After poetry comes music. You don't listen to music, you participate in music. You reach for your beloved lyre, its strings freshly tuned and lightly perfumed with lavender. You strum a soft chord. It sounds like a mosquito having second thoughts. Undeterred, you begin a ballad, something about doomed love and improperly stored lentils. Your voice, trained by imperial tutors and shower acoustics, echoes through the room like a sleepy seagull. It's not technically beautiful, but it's earnest. And in Rome, earnestness from an emperor is more terrifying than any army. Once a visiting diplomat compared your singing to the gentle wail of a dolphin bidding farewell. You promoted him. Today, your song ends with a long high note that causes a vase to crack slightly. Someone whispers divine resonance. You pretend not to hear. You absolutely heard. With the concert concluded, the meal continues. Calvis has returned now, offering honey-glazed dormice on rosemary skewers. You take one, politely nibble the ear, and casually ask whether anyone has written an ode to the noble turnip. No one answers. Dessert is a mountain of dates stuffed with pine nuts and regret. You eat 3, maybe 4. Who's counting? You're emperor. You invented Roman calorie amnesia. And then comes the nap. This is not just sleep. This is postprandial reverence. You retreat to your napping chamber, different from your sleeping chamber, obviously, and lie down on a chaise that has been gently warmed by the sun and a small dog. The dog is decorative. You named him Triumphus. He has his own toga. You drift into the light doze of an overfed demigod. Outside, the heron continues to stare. In your dream, you're being chased by a sentient statue of Mars who insists you owe him poetry royalties. You try to explain the nature of public domain. He doesn't listen. You wake up just in time to receive an update from a senator who's traveled 3 days to bring you news of a minor rebellion in a province whose name you can't quite remember. You nod solemnly and say, "We shall address it after theater." He bows. He was expecting that. Before you leave the chamber, you recite one final haiku. Fig brave and silent, rests where wine once dared to flow. Tuesday never ends. Someone writes it down. You pretend it was spontaneous. The sun begins to lean westward, painting the palace walls in lazy amber, which means it's time for the next sacred rite in the imperial Tuesday theater practice. You've already performed for your lunch guests, your parrot, and an extremely unresponsive fig, but none of that counts. This is the real stage, the private amphitheater inside your palace complex built, not for public adoration, though that's a nice bonus, but for personal greatness. You call it the Echoarium, because it echoes, and because no one dared suggest a better name. You arrive not in a chariot, but in a reclining litter shaped like a swan. You invented it. Possibly by accident. The swan's eyes are rubies. Its wings flap slightly when you shift. It is far too much, and yet not enough. You dismount dramatically and are greeted by your troupe, a collection of professional actors, terrified senators, lute-strumming slaves, and one elderly dancer named Melina, whose knees no longer bend but whose commitment is absolute. They applaud lightly. One claps with only his index fingers. You note this for later. Your director approaches. He's sweating, not because of the heat, but because you rewrote the script again. Overnight, twice. The play is now called The Tragedy of Buttercup, the Doomed Philosopher, and it features, among other things, a surprise monologue from a haunted turnip. Rehearsals begin. You stride onto the stage wearing a golden mask that depicts your own face, but slightly sadder. It's your tragic but wise look. There's a whole set of them in the dressing room, wistful, brooding, lightly betrayed, and deeply contemplating bread. You switch masks mid-scene dramatically, and often sometimes with no narrative reason. Your lines are long, winding, and mostly improvised. The court scribe tries to take notes but runs out of wax tablets by line 12. The chorus attempts to keep up. They do not succeed. One poor senator accidentally rhymes honor with llama. You pause. That's not even Latin, you whisper. He nods slowly, like a man accepting exile. Outside the amphitheater, Rome moves on, markets bustle, lovers argue, chariots rattle. But here inside this little marble bubble, time has become entirely yours. You spend 10 minutes arguing with a curtain, then give a rousing speech to a potted fig tree. Melina performs a sorrowful, interpretive dance using only her elbows. Someone faints. You call it art. Historians still debate whether Nero's love of performance was genuine obsession or political theater. Some suggest he believed himself the reincarnation of Orpheus. Others think he simply enjoyed being clapped at without being stabbed. Whatever the truth, your plays are legendary, not for their quality, but for their sheer persistence. Between acts, you consult your costume assistant about a cape that's not flowing enough. You require at least 7 feet of dramatic flutter. This cape should weep when I leave a room, you declare. He bows and begins sewing. Next scene, you enter barefoot, carrying a lyre and a basket of pears. This is your disguised prince moment. Everyone pretends not to know it's you. The basket tips, the pears roll. You ad-lib a lament about the fleeting nature of fruit. A guard weeps into his sandal. You take a bow. It's not the end of the play, but you feel it deserves one. Then suddenly, disaster. Someone forgets a line. You freeze. The room holds its breath. But instead of punishing them, you improvise. You become their missing line. You swirl across the stage, arms outstretched, whispering, "Where words fail, I must rise like figs on the wind." Silence. Then thunderous applause. At least from two terrified senators and Melina, whose clapping elbows echo like fate itself. You close rehearsal with a final act, a musical duet with your parrot, which does not go well. It squawks the wrong pitch. You squawk back. Someone declares it avant-garde. You accept this. By now the sun has dipped below the cypress trees. The echoarium glows with torchlight shadows dancing across the marbled colonnades. You remove your mask, gently, like a man stepping out of legend and into a tepid bath. Everyone bows. You thank them with a magnanimous wave. Someone faints again, possibly from relief. On your way out, you pause by the dressing mirror and murmur to your reflection, "They were not ready for Buttercup." You nod. Your reflection nods back. You wink. It winks slower. And just like that, the show is over, for now, until next Tuesday. You return to your private quarters, humming the theme from Scene 3, where the haunted turnip explains fate to a lost goat. It's a strong melody. Surprisingly catchy. You make a note to have it played by the palace fountains tomorrow. Back in your robe, free from capes and metaphors, you glance at the sky. Venus twinkles faintly. You wonder if she enjoyed the performance. You decide she did. You yawn softly. You've burned off your lunch with interpretive sorrow and dramatic monologues. And tomorrow is Wednesday, which means policy meetings, senators, scribes, the real business of empire. But that's future Nero's problem. Night wraps around Rome like a sleepy cat curling into marble. The stars hang lazily over the Palatine Hill, and the last cries of market vendors fade into the warm hush of oil lamps flickering in their sconces. Somewhere a dog barks at a column for reasons known only to dogs. You ignore it. You, Emperor Nero, have entered the final chapter of your Tuesday, the hours of scented baths, anxious omens, and bronze-based self-reflection. Back in your private chamber, vast and hushed, draped with purple fabrics that cost more than entire villas, you remove your sandals and hand them wordlessly to a servant. Not Felix bows and disappears into the shadows like a curtain closing. Another attendant is already preparing your bath. Not just any bath. This one involves goat's milk rose petals, lilac oil, and a few stray gold flakes added not for health, but for morale. A musician plays a lyre softly from behind a curtain, strumming a tune you composed last year called The Lament of the Absent Tiger. You don't know why it's sad. It just is. You lower yourself into the bath with the grace of a minor god and the sigh of someone who just remembered he's been emperor since he was 16. The water is too warm, then too cold, then perfect. You stay silent about this fluctuation to preserve the illusion of serenity. For the next hour, you do absolutely nothing, and yet you are busy. Your thoughts swirl like rose petals in goat milk. You wonder, did the haunted turnip monologue drag a bit? Was the senator who clapped with his index fingers actually mocking you? Did Venus really twinkle at your final bow, or was that just a torch flickering behind a dusty window? This is the danger zone, the hour of mild emperor neurosis. Historians still argue whether Nero suffered from insomnia or whether he simply enjoyed being dramatic about his bedtime. Whatever the case, your mind is very much awake. To calm it, you summon your favorite soothsayer. She enters barefoot, holding a handful of laurel leaves and a very tired chicken. Together you gaze into a polished bronze mirror. The reflection shimmers not with magic, but with candlelight and very expensive oils. She mutters something about Jupiter's disapproval and suggests a sacrificial cake. You nod solemnly, then ask whether Mercury's mood affects your hairline. She pretends not to hear. The bath ends when your fingers wrinkle slightly, an omen you interpret as enough imperial stewing for one night. You rise. Towels descend like birds. You are dried with the care usually reserved for sacred relics. Back in your sleeping chamber, incense curls up from 3 different braziers, one for clarity, one for dreams, and one that just smells like cinnamon because you like it. The bed is massive, covered in silks, and allegedly blessed by 12 priests, possibly more. You've lost count. You slide beneath the sheets only to sit up again and call for the astrologer. He arrives in a robe the color of regret, holding a chart that resembles angry spaghetti. He begins explaining the moon's current position relative to Mars. You listen with your eyes closed. He gets to the part about Venus in retrograde, and you gently interrupt to ask whether tomorrow will be a good day for wearing sapphires. He hesitates. You narrow your eyes. He quickly nods. You dismiss him and roll onto your side. Triumphus. Your small decorative dog leaps onto the bed and spins in a circle before collapsing near your elbow. His snoring begins almost immediately. You meanwhile begin your final ritual, composing tomorrow's opening line. Maybe a lament, a prophecy, a whimsical observation about figs. You whisper to the ceiling. Wednesday, the cruel sequel to Tuesday's forgotten lullaby. Yes, that's the one. You close your eyes. Outside, Rome glows faintly under the stars. The Colosseum hasn't been built yet. The Forum slumbers under its own echoes. And somewhere in a quiet corner of the palace, the parrot mutters, Ave me. You smile, just a little. Your empire will spin on. The senators will bicker. The poets will flatter. The tunics will wrinkle, and the statues will judge. But tonight, on this quiet, boring Tuesday, you ruled not through decree or sword, but through sheer ornamental persistence. And that perhaps is the truest form of power.
And now, as the sounds of the palace fade into gentle night and the oil lamps burn low behind their curtains, you find yourself resting not as an emperor, not as a performer or philosopher or poetic menace to Rome, but as a man wrapped in silk and silence, drifting toward dreams. Your body, heavy with roses and ritual, sinks into the mattress like a stone sinking into warm olive oil. Even your thoughts slow, stretched out into ribbons of half-finished songs and vague memories of plays where vegetables had emotional arcs. The tension of sandals and tunics and performance slips away, replaced by the soft hush of linen and the quiet snore of a loyal dog. Outside, the breeze whispers through the columns. The city sighs, and the sky ever patient drapes itself in stars. You did nothing extraordinary today, and that was the point.
You lived a Tuesday, the way only emperors can, slowly, indulgently, and with just enough lyre solos to make it feel justified. So rest now. Let your breath slow, your limbs still, your mind drift. Forget the turnips, forget the figs, forget the senator who tried to rhyme honor with llama. Just listen to the silence of ancient marble, the softness of a half-remembered poem, the peace of a Rome that sleeps. And as your dreams unfold, strange scented soft, you might find yourself waking in another Tuesday with sandals waiting and a mirror that still says, "You are enough." Good night, Emperor.